There's a certain kind of disrespect that doesn't start with yelling. It starts quiet, casual, like somebody deciding your space mattered a little less than theirs. My neighbor learned the hard way that quiet disrespect can get very expensive. By the time I was done, he paid for every tire mark he ever left in my yard, and he never drove over that grass again. This happened a couple years ago in a neighborhood outside Franklin, Tennessee, where the lots are spread out just enough that everybody feels like they've got breathing room, but still close enough that you notice exactly what your neighbors are doing. My place sat on a corner lot, a broad one, with a side yard that wrapped clean around the driveway. And that side yard mattered to me more than most people probably understood. It wasn't some fancy landscaping project with statues and decorative lights. It was just grass, thick Bermuda grass, bright green most of the year, trimmed clean, edged every couple weeks. But I put real work into it. Every spring, I fertilized it myself. I spent 3 straight weekends digging trenches and laying PVC pipe for a sprinkler system because I got tired of dragging hoses around. 40 feet of pipe, a timer box mounted by the garage, scraped knuckles, muddy boots, and more trips to the hardware store than I care to admit. When it finally came together, I was proud of it. Not because it looked expensive, because I built it. And every inch of that lawn sat inside my property line. Survey stakes had been marked the year we bought the house. No confusión, no gray area, no debate. Then Kyle Mercer moved in next door. Kyle drove a lifted black pickup with oversized tires and smoked windows, the kind of truck that somehow announces itself before you even hear the engine. Nice enough the first week. We waved once or twice, talked about trash pickup, regular neighbor stuff. Then Friday rolled around. I heard tires outside around sunset, but didn't think much of it until Saturday morning when I stepped out with coffee and saw 2 deep ruts carve into the edge of my grass. Fresh. Dirt kicked up. Clear tire tread. I stood there staring at it, coffee in hand, trying to make sense of why anybody would cut across a lawn when they had a perfectly open driveway. I filled the tracks. Didn't say anything. Next weekend, same thing. Friday evening. Saturday morning. 2 more ruts. This time deeper. Kyle had apparently decided it was easier to swing wide through my yard than back his truck into his own driveway. No knock on the door. No, hey man, sorry. Nothing. Just straight through my grass like it was part of the street. I caught him the 3rd Friday. I was carrying a bag of mulch toward the flower bed when he rolled up, turned too wide, and both front tires climbed right onto the lawn. I dropped the mulch bag and yelled, Kyle. He hit the brake halfway across the edge of my yard and leaned out the window. Yeah. I pointed at the grass. You're on my lawn. He glanced down, then shrugged. Didn't think it mattered. I actually laughed a little because I thought he had to be kidding. It matters to me. He gave me this tight smile people wear when they've already decided your concern is inconvenient. Relax, man. It's grass. Then he kept driving. And that was the moment the whole thing changed for me. Because it wasn't really about grass anymore. It was the shrug. The assumption, that weird confidence some people have where they decide your effort, your property, your time, doesn't count if ignoring it makes their day easier. The next morning, I stopped fixing anything. I started documenting. I already had 2 weatherproof cameras mounted under the eaves. One covered the driveway. The other angled toward the side yard and front corner. I pulled footage. Crystal clear. Timestamp visible. Kyle's truck plate visible. Tires rolling directly over the survey marker line. I watched the clip twice. Then I walked outside with my phone, photographed the damage from every angle, and grabbed a steel measuring ruler from the garage. Depth of rut, length, width, square footage, everything. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and looked up Tennessee property damage laws. Turns out, civil claims don't need dramatic destruction. They just need proof. And I had proof. A lot of it. Monday morning, I printed everything. Photos, measurements, still frames from camera footage. A written estimate for turf repair based on local sod replacement rates. Total for the first documented incident, $46. Not huge. That wasn't the point. I mailed it certified with return receipt. By Tuesday afternoon, I almost felt ridiculous. Like maybe I was escalating too much. Maybe he'd apologize. Maybe he'd laugh and hand me $50, and that would be that. Friday evening came. I heard the truck. And even before I checked the camera feed, I already knew. Saturday morning, the tire marks were there again, deeper than before, almost like the first notice had annoyed him enough to make a point. That's when I understood exactly what kind of neighbor Kyle Mercer really was. He hadn't ignored my warning. He'd answered it. And standing there in my yard, staring at fresh tracks, cutting through the grass I'd spent years building, I realized something. If he wanted to make this a weekly habit, I could do that too. If he wanted to make this a weekly habit, I could do that too. Monday morning, I sent notice number 2. Same certified envelope. Same clean documentation. Fresh photos, measurements, timestamps, still frames. Another $48 added to the total. By then, I had a rhythm. Every Friday evening, Kyle's truck would swing wide, cutting that corner like my property was part of his turning radius. And every Saturday morning, I'd walk out there with coffee in one hand and my phone in the other, documenting damage like an insurance adjuster. At first, I kept thinking he'd stop. Nobody keeps doing something once money gets attached to it, right? But Kyle wasn't wired that way. If anything, the envelopes seemed to irritate him. And once he got irritated, he got louder. Week 3, I was kneeling in the yard filling sprinkler heads with fresh mulch when his truck rolled past slow enough for the window to come down. You seriously mailing me invoices now? I stood up, only for damage. He snorted. You're billing me for tire tracks? I'm billing you for destroying my lawn. He leaned against the steering wheel with that grin he always had when he thought he was winning. You can't be serious. I am. He laughed, actually laughed, then drove off. And Friday night, he cut across the yard again. Harder. Fast enough this time to throw dirt onto the sidewalk. That one damaged a sprinkler line. I found a leak Saturday morning. Water bubbling up near the survey stake, soaking the edge of the turf. I shut the system off, dug down with a hand shovel, and found a cracked PVC elbow. I sat back in the dirt staring at it. And honestly, I got mad. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind. The kind where your chest tightens and everything gets very calm. Because now it wasn't just grass. Now it was hours of work underground. Materials. Repairs. Time. That invoice came out to $92. And I mailed it. Then another. And another. Week after week. The mail clerk at the local post office started recognizing me. She'd see the stack of certified envelopes and smile. Neighbor trouble again? Little bit. She stamped receipts and handed me tracking slips. By week 5, Kyle had gotten bold enough to stop pretending it was accidental. He'd turn deliberately across the lawn while unloading fishing gear or hauling coolers from the truck. One Saturday, his brother was with him. I heard one of them say, "Dude, he's still on about the grass?" Kyle answered loud enough for me to hear. Guy acts like it's the White House lawn. They laughed. I kept trimming the hedge and didn't look up. That irritated him more than yelling would have. He wanted a reaction, wanted a fight. What he got instead was paperwork. Every Monday. Certified. Detailed. Clinical. Photos attached. Timestamps. Repair costs. Copies saved digitally and in print. By week 7, I had a folder on my desk labeled Mercer Property Damage. Inside were 14 separate incidents, 14 video clips, 14 damage assessments, and a running total of $620. I knew that number by heart. Part of me wondered if this had become absurd. My wife, Dana, definitely thought so at first. One night, she looked at the folder on the dining room table and asked, "How far are you actually taking this?" I shrugged. "As far as he wants." She raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerous." I smiled. "No, dangerous would be losing my temper. This is documentation." She laughed at that, then flipped through the printed photos, and her expression changed. Because laid out one after another, it looked different. The same truck, same tire angle, same damage, week after week, like a pattern, like deliberate behavior. She tapped the stack. "Okay, wow. Exactly. You keeping all the videos?" Backed up twice. That got a grin out of her. "Of course you are." Friday came again. I was inside cleaning up dinner dishes when I heard tires. I checked the live camera feed from my phone. Kyle turned wide, paused, then drove directly over the edge of the lawn while looking toward my porch camera. He knew he was on camera, and he did it anyway, like he was daring me. Saturday morning, I found the deepest ruts yet. One tire had sunk enough to shear through the turf and expose damp soil underneath. The sprinkler line was barely missed. I crouched there running my hand along the groove and honestly had this weird moment where I stopped being angry. Because suddenly I knew how this was going to end. People like Kyle assume volume equals leverage. Confidence equals ownership. But paper stays. And evidence doesn't care how smug somebody is. Monday, I mailed another notice. Then Tuesday afternoon, my next door across neighbor Marlene waved me over while she watered flowers. She was retired, sharp as a tack, noticed everything. She lowered her voice and said, "Kyle came by asking if I had cameras facing your yard." I blinked. "He did." She nodded. I told him maybe. That made me laugh. Then she leaned closer. He seemed nervous. Good. Friday evening, I was on the porch when Kyle pulled in. He stopped halfway in his driveway and stared at me. Didn't move. Didn't cut across. Just sat there. For a second, I thought maybe it was over. Then he cranked the wheel hard and rolled straight across the corner again. Slow. Intentional. Like theater. Then parked. I stood. He got out. Smirked. Send another one. I looked at him. I will. He stepped closer. You know, nobody actually sues over grass, right? I nodded. Probably true. He smiled. Then I added, but courts do care about repeat documented damage. His smile faded. Just a little. And that tiny change in his expression told me something important. For the first time, Kyle had actually thought about consequences. Real ones. The following Monday, I mailed Notice 14. Total, $620. I attached every incident summary in a clean spreadsheet. Dates, damage, repair cost, photos referenced by file number, and at the bottom one line, payment requested within 10 business days before civil filing. That Wednesday, I got the return receipt. Signed. Thursday night, Dana looked out the front window and said quietly, "He's outside." Kyle was standing near the property line, hands in his pockets, looking at the grass, then up toward the cameras, then back down again. No truc, no shortcut, just standing there in silence. And for a second, I almost thought he might knock and apologize. He didn't. He walked back inside. Then Sunday afternoon, right as I was setting iced tea on the porch table, there came a hard knock at the front door. I opened it. Kyle stood there with his arms crossed tight against his chest, jaw locked, eyes narrowed like he'd been rehearsing this conversation all morning. And before I even said a word, he looked me dead in the face and said, "This has gotten ridiculous. This has gotten ridiculous." That's what Kyle said standing on my porch, arms crossed, jaw clenched, trying hard to look irritated instead of nervous. It was late afternoon, bright Tennessee sun dropping lower across the street. The kind of quiet Sunday where you can hear sprinklers 3 houses down and somebody grilling burgers around the corner. I looked at him for a second. Then I nodded. Yeah, it has. He blinked like that wasn't the answer he expected. You sent 14 certified letters over grass. Over property damage. He exhaled hard. This is petty. Maybe it was. Maybe from the outside it looked ridiculous. A grown man with folders and receipts arguing about tire tracks. But standing there looking at Kyle Mercer, after nearly 2 months of him acting like my yard existed for his convenience, I didn't feel petty. I felt tired. And very, very prepared. I gestured toward the porch table. "Sit down." He hesitated, then sat, still stiff, still annoyed. I opened my laptop, pulled up the folder, and hit play. First clip, Friday evening. His truck cutting wide. Tires crossing the survey line. Then a still image. Timestamp. Date. Damage photo. Invoice. $46. I clicked again. Second clip. Third. Fourth. Kyle started shifting in his chair. By clip 6, his crossed arms loosened. By clip 9, he stopped looking at me and started staring at the screen. At clip 12, he rubbed his forehead. The porch stayed quiet except for video playback and birds in the trees. 14 separate weekends. 14 tire tracks. 14 timestamps. Every one undeniable. When the last clip ended, I closed the laptop halfway and folded my hands. Kyle sat there staring at the wood grain of the table. Finally, he muttered, "You kept all of it?" "Yep." "For months?" "Yep." He let out this slow breath through his nose. Then looked up. You really would have filed. I met his eyes. Yes. No anger. No raised voice. Just yes. Because by then there wasn't anything emotional left to prove. He leaned back and shook his head. I thought you were bluffing. I wasn't. I figured. He paused and laughed once under his breath. Honestly, I figured eventually you'd just stop caring. That one landed harder than he probably meant it to. Because that was exactly the whole thing. He thought caring was temporary. That boundaries were down. That people get tired and let things slide. And maybe sometimes they do, but not this time. I said, Kyle, if you'd knocked on my door the first week and said, hey, sorry, I'd have probably fixed the grass and forgotten about it. He looked embarrassed. Actually embarrassed. I know, but you didn't. He nodded once. Then he stood. No dramatic speech. No jitting. No apology either. Just awkward silence, and a guy suddenly realizing a problem he dismissed had become expensive. He left. That was Sunday. Wednesday evening, I came home from running errands and found a plain white envelope sitting inside my mailbox. No stump. No note. Just cash. $620. Every dollar. Counted exactly. Dana looked over my shoulder while I stood there at the kitchen counter. Well, I counted again, then smiled. He paid. She laughed. No way. Every cent. She shook her head. I cannot believe this happened over grass. And honestly, neither could I. But the weirdest part came after. Because once the money showed up, everything changed. Kyle stopped cutting across completely. He backed in his own driveway every single time. Slowly. Carefully. Like a man suddenly aware his steering wheel had consequences. The grass recovered. I repaired the sprinkler line. Reseeded the damaged sections. By spring, the Bermuda had grown thick enough that you couldn't even tell where the worst ruts had been. And for a while, that was it. Quiet. Simple. Done. Then one Saturday morning, maybe a month later, I was trimming the edge near the sidewalk when Kyle walked over carrying a coffee. First time he'd approached since porch day. He stood a few feet away. Awkward as hell. Then he said, looks good. I kept trimming. Thanks. Pause. Then he cleared his throat. My brother still thinks the whole thing was insane. That made me laugh. Mine probably would too. He nodded, then surprised me. I shouldn't have kept doing it. I looked up. He shrugged. I got used to thinking it wasn't a big deal. Was to me. I know. Another pause. Then he lifted the coffee a little. Fair enough. And walked back home. That was the closest thing to an apology I ever got. Maybe for some people that wouldn't be enough. Maybe some people would have taken him to court anyway. Pushed harder. Made an example out of him. And I've had people ask me since if I think I overreacted. Maybe mailing 14 certified notices over tire marks sounds crazy. Maybe I could have yelled louder. Maybe he would have stopped sooner. Or maybe yelling would have just become a neighborhood argument nobody wins. The paperwork worked. That's what still makes me laugh. Not revenge. Not the money. Just the fact that the thing he dismissed as just grass ended with him standing on my porch watching 14 clips of himself, making the exact same expensive mistake. And every now and then I still see that black pickup backing carefully into his driveway, never touching the lawn, not even close. Like he gives that corner an extra 3 feet now, which honestly feels kind of satisfying. But here's the part one still wonder about. If I hadn't had cameras, if I hadn't documented every single weekend, if there'd been no receipts, no timestamps, no proof, would he have ever stopped? Or would he still be cutting through there today, acting like my yard belonged to him because nobody made it inconvenient? I still don't know. So tell me what you think. Did I take it too far over something small? Or was documenting everything and charging him exactly what the damage cost the only reason he finally respected the boundary? Drop your opinion in the comments because I've heard both sides on this one, and honestly I'm curious where you land. And if you've ever had a neighbor cross a line and act like it was no big deal until consequences showed up, hit subscribe because trust me, the next story gets even wilder.